practical Parsha for Parshat Devarim. Now, the name of this week's Parsha is Devarim, and the name of this book, this fifth and final book of the Torah, is Devarim. Devarim literally means words or items, okay? But in this case, it means words. And the reason why it's called Devarim, because it starts off with the words. These are the words that Moshe spoke, that Moshe addressed to all of Israel, okay? To all the Jews, which is just interesting to note. We're not going to elaborate on it, but the fact is that this is one of those, one of those classes that Moshe gave, one of his addresses, that it was to the entire body of all the Jews. And we'll soon learn why he did it so. Understand what that meant, to gather all the Jews together. Understand that Machane Yisrael, the Jewish camp, 12 tribes, just, do some kind of rough, quick sketch of math in your mind. 600,000 men above the age of 20. Okay? And they're all married. They got married at younger ages. They all have at least one spouse and children. So can you imagine, do the math, there's several million people at least. These several million people, they lived, yes, condensed, not like we're used to, in our sprawling cities, but still, it was quite a feat to gather several million people together. But this was very, very important. And this Moshe spoke to all of Israel. Okay? Now, what did he say to them? What is this speaking about? What begins here? What can we learn from it? So it says that let's follow this. He spoke to them across the Yarden. Across the Yarden means the Jordan. Now, Moshe, as God said to him in last week's Parsha, which was the end of the fourth book of the Torah, you're not crossing into the Parsha, to the Jordan. You're not going to go into Israel. So it's on the other side. When you say the other side, you mean the other side of the main thing. What's the main thing? Of course, the land of Israel. Nice. In the wilderness, meaning in the desert. Isn't it obvious that we're still in the desert? Okay. On the Arava plain, facing Suf. Now, what is this Suf? Suf, at least the automatic assumption would be, Suf is the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds that split. That was called Yam. Yam means sea. Suf, that's its name, Yam Suf. I ask you a question, without even being an expert in geography. If they're right near the Jordan, they should be quite far from the Yam Suf. But it's giving it to us as a geographical marker, as a location of where Moshe spoke. Between Paran and Tofel, and Lavan and Chatzeros and Dizahav. If your head's not spinning by now, it really should be. For several reasons. Because if you look at a map, the actual places that are identifiable, meaning the names that he uses that are actually, such that one can locate on a map, at least on a biblical map, you'll find that one place is here, one place is here. One place is closer to Egypt, like I said, the Yam Suf. The Jordan is right here, they're right about to cross into Israel. Moreover, as the sages point out, you'll find that some of these names don't even exist. Not only not on our map, but they never existed. So what exactly is going on here? And why is it important for us to know where he spoke this? Typically, most of the Torah, we don't know exactly when it was said and where it was said. You know why? Because it has absolutely no bearing on the value of what was said, on the importance, on the impact. So what is this about? And here is a very, very important lesson. And the truth is that all of us, whether we are employers, parents, teachers, co-workers, even to our colleagues, friends, acquaintances, these type of approach to how to speak to others, how to even tell others off, needs to be adopted. in order to have a better society. And here's what happened. Moshe, as we'll soon see, is very, very close to his passing. Moshe is very close to his passing. If you recall, we learned last week, in the last final of the hurrahs of Moshe's career, Moshe was told by God, you smite the Midianites, and then you're going to pass away. That's it. It's done. We're gone. He already appointed Joshua. He already gave him, so to speak, the scepter here. You're in charge, right? And Moshe's ready to pass away. There's exactly 37 days left to his life. Okay? Now, if you ask me, did he know, did he not know? We do know that, and I'm not going to go into that. However, just to answer the question and to move on, it's interesting that we find many, many stories throughout the generations that righteous people had either outright knowledge or a good premonition of when they're going to pass away. But he certainly had very good reason to believe that it's imminent because God said to him, so he don't have any doubt. Okay? He was now going to, and he did, reprove the Jewish people. Rebuke them for all their wrongdoing. And, yeah, in English, to tell them off. Not to tell them off for the sake to just stick it to them, but, as we'll find out later, and as we progress in this Chumash, in this book of the Torah, to actually guide them and point out to them how to learn from their mistakes, how to not repeat them, with the hope, with the prayer that the Jews will learn from this and not repeat it in future generations and not bring to calamities which unfortunately the Jewish people have known and sadly, on the most part, a result of our failure to heed these exact warnings that come in this book. Okay? Now, the way he did it, however, is phenomenal. And this is what he was doing here. He was not giving them a geographical location. He was not telling them where he's speaking, because otherwise it's schizophrenia. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't exist, or it's hundreds of miles apart. Rather, he was naming the places in which the Jews did significant harm to their relationship with Hashem. The locations, and in code, he hinted to what they did. For example, when he says opposite Suf, facing Suf, that is the sins that they did by the Yam Suf, the crossing of the sea. Before and after. What was before? Well, before, when they all stood there and suddenly see the Egyptians and they all became so, I started crying for their mommies, and then God just looked at Egypt, like, can you please, hello? You know what I mean? Like, these people are talking about going back. Like, you just got out. You want to go back already? Lack of faith. When they crossed and they're on the other side, and where they headed to right now to get the Torah, they became totally blinded and absolutely absorbed by all the riches that the Egyptians that just had died had washed up on the side of on the shore. And it says Moshe had to forcibly remove them, had to forcibly make them continue on. And this is after they left Egypt, and it says, I'm just giving you an interesting anecdote from the Talmud. The account that the Talmud gives is that the poorest Jew, that means the Jew who left with the least goodies from Egypt, was 90 donkeys laden with goods. 90. That was the least. So guys, you really need more? You know what I'm saying? But they got totally consumed. It's like, a child that has his pockets full away with candy, and now you open up the candy shop door and it goes crazy. I mean, you can't eat that much candy. By the time you get through the candy, you're going to detest candy. You're not going to like it anymore. That's how much you have. You know what I mean? So that's another sin. Maybe you want to call it, I'm just naming it on my own. I don't know if that's exactly what he meant. The sin of lack of faith and the sin of gluttony. Okay? Then you have, just to give you an example, where it says Lavan. Okay? You see it says Lavan and Lavan. Okay? I'm giving you examples here. Lavan, you see where it says, and Lavan. Lavan in Hebrew means white. What was white that the Jews complained about? The manna. Right? That they were ungrateful. Here Hashem was giving you the best. Hashem was giving them the purest for the foods. We're not talking about at the beginning when they were hungry, which in itself was a misdeed. But at least you can excuse it, at least you can explain it away. Listen, they were starving, they were panicked, they were nervous, they had their children who were hungry. God was testing them. But here you guys are eating the manna and enjoying the best of everything, and yet they complain. Another example that he said, V'di Zahav. What is Di Zahav? Zahav, anybody who knows any Hebrew, even elementary, knows what Zahav means. Zahav is gold. Di can perhaps also mean an abundance of gold. What comes to mind when we think about an abundance of gold and sin? The golden calf. And the truth is, this was, as you see over here, I'm going to use this as a good example here. This was two-pronged. In the one hand, he was admonishing them and saying, you had an abundance of gold. God gave you so much gold, so much riches. What did you do with it? You turned around, you made a golden calf. However, at the same time, I said it's two-pronged, at the same time, amazingly, this great leader, as the Talmud says, Moshe loved the Jewish people, and that everybody agrees on. Everybody, even those who were somewhat opposed to the Torah and so on. Moshe was also speaking in their defense. And he was like saying, almost like, yes, you committed a sin. Yes, you used the gold that God gave you for that, but the truth is, on a certain level, it's almost like you were tempted into it. God gave you too much gold. God basically gave, and it's almost like, sometimes you say to the parent, it's your fault. What do you mean it's my fault? Yes, you spoiled the kid. You spoiled the kid too much. Okay? And the same goes with all the other ones. Understand that at the time he's admonishing them, he's also, and here's the point of the discussion today, he's also defending them. And the way he's doing it, think about how he's doing it. In code. He's not outright hurting their feelings. He's not saying, you lowlifes, you this. He's not like, what you would imagine, the big preacher getting up there and waving his hand. He was speaking softly. He was speaking lovingly. It had to be said. They had to be reminded. Not for the sake of them to be hurt, but for the sake for them to open their minds, realize, be aware, okay? This is perfectly okay. Now it's interesting also that the way he did it teaches us, and when he did it, teaches us so much about how one's approach should be to, when needed, when necessary, to admonishing someone, to reproving someone. Whether it's your own child, whether it's a friend, like I said before, whether it's a colleague, whether it's an employee. You have to do it. Yesterday I sat with a person who works in HR, and she's like, look, I have to let people go. I have to clean house. I still have to do it with a smile. I still have to be nice, but I have to look out for the best interest of the company, and she's perfectly correct. That is the way. If she doesn't, then she is cheating her boss, and she'd lose her job eventually. She's got to clean house. But she doesn't have to walk around screaming at the people. She doesn't. She's a pleasant person. But she knows what's right and what's wrong. So Moshe, when did he choose to speak to them? These are things that happened 40 years ago. In fact, a lot of the people that actually perpetrated these sins are not even here. So why wait until now? And why do it in the way that he did it? You recall I said before that he had to gather everyone. You know what it means to mobilize several million people? I mean, even in Woodstock, there weren't several million people. You know what I mean? And that was a mess. I just saw. I happened to see people talking. Is it almost the anniversary or something now? Now everyone's talking about it. I see it on social, like on the internet. So that's why it's on my mind. Even that, and that was an absolute mess. And what was 60,000 people? It wasn't. Millions. You know what it is to gather millions of people? The answer is Moshe waited until now. Why? And this is a key. This is so powerful. it says you should not admonish, you should not reprove your friend, meaning another person, in a manner that the person should be embarrassed. We actually find a precedent for this. Jacob did the same thing. Before he passes away, what does it say? He gathers his sons and he says, let me talk to you, let me tell you. And he starts to quote, listen, I was upset about that. Things that happened 20 years before, 30 years before. And he didn't say, listen, I know you sold him as a slave. I know. Why wait now? So it says because A, they shouldn't be embarrassed. He knew he's gonna pass away soon. Imagine you have to continue coming to the same shul or to the same workplace where the guy told you off. He knows everything about you. It makes it more difficult. If you know the person knows is one thing. When the person has told you that they know, now to have to look at them and then look at you every day is quite difficult. So this way Moshe says what he has to say. He does what he has to do. You have to. You can't remain silent, especially when there's a lesson to be learned. But he knows he's going to pass away soon. They're not going to have to continuously be embarrassed, looking at him and going, oh, Moshe knows everything about us. He reads our minds. He knows everything we've been through. That's A.
New generation. Yeah. It's new people.
Correct. Moreover, it tells us, the sages tell us from here we learn, to do it this way. So you should not chastise the person, criticize the person, and then have to do it over again. The tendency we have is, especially if we don't see immediate results, now you don't always see immediate results, because there may not necessarily be an opportunity for them to perpetrate that same sin, that same misdeed, but in our minds, has the person changed? And we are, as the good people we are, sometimes you may be motivated to just kind of tell them again to make sure it hits home. But in the meantime, what you're doing is, now you're beating the person. The first time you did a mitzvah, you did the right thing, especially if you did it in an orderly manner. You did it in a manner that really gives the person the utmost respect, like Moshe did, not even hurt their feelings, not speak directly at them, speak to them, speak with them, give it to them in a way where they can walk away and have some food for thought and think, and they shouldn't actually, another thing, they shouldn't actually also instinctively detest your words. Understand, when the Torah tells us that one has an obligation to admonish their colleagues, their peers, when they see them do something wrong, the Torah says, you should certainly rebuke your friend, meaning your compatriot. You should not carry any sin on it. And it means two ways. First, we should do it in a way that embarrasses him. So you're going to now, not only you're not really getting your full credit for your mitzvah of correcting somebody else, but now you've generated one of the worst transgressions. You've hurt someone else. You've embarrassed someone else. But moreover, I want you to think of it on a psychological level, a deeper psychology. If you do it in a way that stings the person, that hurts the person, will that person actually accept what you're saying? The answer is most likely not. Think of yourself. If someone's telling me off and someone is just sticking their nails emotionally into me, I'm shut down. I may hear every word they say, I may be able to repeat it, but I will never absorb it and certainly will never take it in a manner that it was really should have been meant to be received. In other words, it will never, and in fact, I may even in spite, at a subconscious level, in spite, never ever correct that problem because I hate you. I'm thinking in my mind, you get angry. And that anger shuts down your ability to absorb and to think and to comprehend. You know what? That person doesn't hate me. That person likes me. That person wants me to do better next time. And that's what Moshe was teaching us. You see? And when you continue doing it again, it's no longer about the other person correcting the other person. It's about your need to control. It's your need to say what you have to say. And that's what Moshe, who is actually as we know, the quintessential leader. We learn leadership. We learn teaching and pedagogy, everything from the way Moshe did it. Okay, remember, Moshe had the best teacher, right? Yeah. God himself. So the best person to learn from is Moshe. And Moshe teaches us how the approach should be. How one approaches, dealing with others' misdeeds.
Don't commit the same mistake. The new generation that is coming to the land have to know about the past
Right. No. I'm saying
Or
that.
not
Exactly.
to commit it in the future.
Yeah, right. But now, some of these people that are now adults were children then, so they were there. They didn't maybe perpetrate the actual misdeeds, the sins, but they definitely were there. They were present. They were witness to it.
Yes.
And Moshe is now highlighting and saying, listen, this is what you guys is, because collectively as a people, we all did it. Understand, collectively as a people, even though you and I were never there physically, but we're also part of that. And certainly when we continuously repeat the same exact mistakes. But look at verse 4, just another good point about it. It says, after he had smitten Sichon, king of the Amorites, who was living in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, right, who was living in Ashtaroth, in Edrei. What happened? He's telling us that all these words Moshe was telling them was what? After he had smitten Sichon and Og. I mean, come on, if anybody reached this point in the Torah, that you're already studying the 5th book, I guess it's quite reasonable to assume that you've passed the 4th book. And in the 4th book, and not that long ago, we've not only spoken about how Sichon came out and they decimated him, and how Og came out to fight them and they took care of business. We even learned about how they divided their land and already allotted it to Reuven and God and everything. So why does he have to mention this obvious fact? Why does he have to mention this information that is so obvious? And again, the answer is, and it teaches us something. Don't just come to wave your finger at somebody, you did this, you that. What did you do for me? In other words, is our connection purely because you got something to tell me off about? Is our connection because, even as a parent, think about it. Is my only connection my child to point out what they did wrong? Moshe tells them, and the Torah points it out. I've made accomplishments for you. I didn't just bring you here and now just telling you off. You know what I mean? We had some very, very good accomplishments, some gains. I actually began to conquer what is not going to be, but what already is part of Israel. You understand? In other words, as a parent, we have to. We must be there also, not only to give the kid chocolate, not only to just poo the kid. There's times when you have to say, I'm sorry, this is not right, this is not acceptable, this is not how we behave, we don't do this in our family, this is not in accordance with what we believe in, and so on. But don't just be there to do just that. Be there also, or maybe even more so, to be that good parent, to conquer for the child, to do what you can for the child. So there is a balanced relationship. And the child doesn't have in their mind that, and that, again, back to what I said before, will actually cause a negative effect, a negative result, which is, my mother only talks to me when I do something wrong. Right? So this is a very, very powerful message. Moshe says, I spoke to them after I've already made accomplishments for them. It's not like I'm just coming to tell them off and wag my finger at them. This is a very, very powerful thing. Okay? So, any comments, any questions on this point? Okay, I just want to point out another very interesting thing that's very, very practical. If you look in verse 5, in the land of Moab, Moshe began to elucidate this Torah as follows. Now, what does it mean to elucidate the Torah? I mean, I think things have been quite clear up to now. And what has he been doing in the last 40 years or so since they received the Torah? Hasn't he been explaining the Torah to them? Hasn't he been teaching it to them? And anybody that had any questions, remember they set up the judges and there was always people to ask, and if you couldn't, there was a hierarchy. If they didn't know the answer, you went to the next tier, until you came all the way to Moses. Right? So what is it that he did now that's different than always? And the sages tell us that what he did at this point was something amazing, and it's not humanly possible to do, but he did the following. He spoke the Torah in all 70 languages. Note that the languages we have today, I don't know exactly what's the official count of how many languages we have. There are hundreds of languages, maybe, I don't know, different dialects and everything. But the fact is that they all originate with the 70 nations, with the 70 languages, back to the Tower of Babel, when it says Hashem split them into 70 nations. Okay? And what happens Moshe stood there, imagine, for 37 days, and that explains, because I say a book like this doesn't take, it's not that long of a book, the fifth book, it doesn't take 37 days to say. Now, I just don't know from the other end, the Jewish people standing there listening to Chinese, to Russian, to Greek, to Latin, you know, they go, it sounds like Latin, Greek to me. Literally, it sounds like Greek to them, it sounds like Chinese, it was Chinese. What the Jews felt, I don't know. I don't know if there's any account. What I do know is that Moshe did. Moshe said it in all 70 languages. And the question becomes, well, I don't know if he always spoke 70 languages or got them, but it's interesting that there's actually accounts, like for example, this you think it's an amazing, wow, somebody speaks so many languages, but there's actually accounts of the high court, the Sanhedrin. It said that they had to be, I don't want to say that each and every individual judge on the court, 71 judges, had to be versed in every single language, but collectively they had to be fluent in all languages, lest something comes up from anything, if it's idol worship, or for any other nation or whatever it is. So, and each one was so smart that they were versed in many languages. So it could be, one knew 5, one knew 10, one knew this, and collectively there was an understanding of all languages. I can just tell you personally, from reading letters of the Rebbe, and you can ask anyone, for example, in other words, I'm saying that I had a live example of this. The Rebbe was obviously, doesn't need my approval, the Rebbe was obviously a very, very smart person. And besides, that his knowledge in Torah, the Rebbe was also very knowledgeable in worldly matters and sciences and everything else. There were quite a number of languages which, although the Rebbe himself maybe didn't officially speak in, but the Rebbe clearly writes to people in response. For example, let's say German. I just recently saw it. And the Rebbe writes, you can write to me, you can continue writing to me in German, but obviously the response is in English or in Hebrew. The Rebbe says, however, my secretariat doesn't speak that language, and that's why the response like the Rebbe couldn't respond to them in German. The Rebbe's not going to sit there and start writing a letter. The Rebbe will dictate it quickly, in shorthand, and they will type it up. So that's why it's in English, and English is universal language. The same goes with French, the same goes with so many other Spanish and other languages. I mean, there's even a story with Spanish where somebody was in the room to translate for people who didn't speak Yiddish or English. I once told the story over here in Shabbat, and he relates. He says that he translated what the Rebbe said to the people, and the Rebbe says, that's not what I meant. So automatically, the Rebbe understood everything he was telling them. The Rebbe just maybe didn't speak fluently, for whatever reason the Rebbe chose not to. Trying to point out a living example that I know that you can count without, you need at least 2 hands to count the languages that we know that the Rebbe understood. And many of them go back to Latin, go back to Greek, so we can see, somebody who's, academically driven, academically based, certainly is, can kind of jump from one language to another. Okay, I'm not trying to downplay, I'm trying to actually say that, you say like, wow, 70 languages. In this instance, it was obviously divine. Okay, I can just explain it that way, it was divine. Actually, we do have a precedent for that, I want to say, by the story of Joseph. The Midrash relates, actually, it's interesting. So another person that we for sure know that he knew 70 languages. The Midrash relates that the Pharaoh, when Moshe came to Pharaoh, Joseph, and perhaps if I'm not mistaken, and please don't quote me, but I believe similarly it's said about Moshe, the rule in Egypt was that the king is like the supreme and greatest person. And in fact, in that case, those years, the pharaohs considered, proclaimed themselves as a god, right? As a deity, God forbid. So one of the things is you have to know 70 languages. And the hierarchy was based on the 70 steps that went up to the throne. And every language, there was someone there who spoke that language. And if you couldn't speak and converse with them, you couldn't pass. So you would, if you imagine going to the king and you only knew 3 languages, you would stand on the 67th step and maybe you could hear the king, maybe not. If the king chose not to scream, then you didn't know what he was telling you. Okay? Well, here's what happened. Joseph went all the way up, because it says the night before an angel came in the dream and taught him all the languages. I guess just turned there's a little switch in everyone's brain for each language, and when you write it has a code, and went in this, and he knew all 7 languages. But guess what happened? When he got up to the top, no one had spoken to him Hebrew yet, so he started speaking Hebrew to Pharaoh, and I don't know what he's talking about. He got a blank look. He says, well, I know Hebrew. You don't. And Pharaoh goes, oh no. If anybody finds out about it, he's king. Not the deputy, you understand? Not the, whatever, the grand vizier that he made him, appointed him. So he made him swear. He says, swear to me right here, right now. He swore to him, but he doesn't need that position. That's not where the money is, right? He swore to him. It actually turned out, you see how Hashem orchestrates everything? Later on, many years later, when Yaakov made Yosef swear that he will bury him in Israel, in the Holy Land. And what happened? When he came to Pharaoh, they didn't want Jacob to leave because they all knew the blessings that he brought, and they wanted it. That's precisely the reason why Yaakov wanted out of Egypt, even after his death. They'll turn his burial site into a shrine and worship him. He didn't want that. So Yosef says, my father really made me take an oath and do it. So Pharaoh says, no problem. I know some people. Call some of the sorcerers, call them this, we'll undo any oath, what's the problem? So Yosef said to him, okay, if I'm going to undo any oath, I got oaths in the past I want to undo. You might want to rethink this. And Pharaoh's like, you have the green light. Okay? So at least from this story that I just told you, we know that Yosef also knew 70 languages. Here's the point. The question is, why? Why? It's obvious that the Jews just stood there and they didn't even know what he said, no clue what he's saying. So why say the whole Torah is 70 languages? I think you would agree with me that at best, collectively, maybe the Jews knew 3 or 4 or 5 languages. Think about it. They spent hundreds of years in Egypt. Okay, so they knew the Egyptian language and all the various dialects. But actually not, because they were all concentrated in one area of Egypt. Hebrew, got it. What else?
Babylonia.
What Babylonian? They never went to Babylonia yet.
No, but they...
No, but not
Yeah,
yet.
they're going to be there in about 1,000 something years. You know what I'm saying? I mean, how many languages do they know? So they know a couple languages. Maybe some people who just...
Aramaic.
They do Aramaic is really a derivative of the Babylonian language. Again, so they knew. They knew 5 languages. And let me ask you a question. Were they or were they not well versed in Hebrew? That was their first language, hands down. He already had spoken to them in Hebrew for 40 years. So they know what he's got to say. So what's the point in saying it? The Rabbi explains that what he did, and it actually is a very interesting debate. And think about it. The Torah is a holy word. Obvious. It comes from Hashem. As we say, as it's referred to, the wisdom of God. Is it right to speak the Torah, to study Torah, to disseminate Torah in an unholy language? And I'll tell you what, it's a little secret. Even modern day Hebrew would be in that category. In other words, I don't know how many people can actually speak in biblical Hebrew fluently. You know, that's something you got to train yourself to do. The modern day Hebrew still is a blend of modern words, and so in English we call it psychology, in Hebrew it's psychologia, and Spanish is very similar. So it's these are Latin words, these are Latin terms. It's not pure biblical Hebrew as appears in the Torah or in the prophets. Okay? So, is it okay to teach Torah, to learn Torah in English, in Spanish? And the answer is, it would seem that it's not. But Moshe actually set that into motion. Hundreds, thousands of years ahead of when it was needed and when it was actually necessary in an actual manner. And that's because had he not done so, then it would have been forbidden. Then it would be impossible to legitimately translate the Torah into any language, and it would certainly not be a holy endeavor. The fact is today, even if somebody doesn't speak Hebrew, and especially in our times, think about it, what we're learning here connects to our times. There's nobody that has the obstacle of, I don't understand Hebrew, so I can't study Torah. It's in any language, on any level, for children even. There's no way you can't study Torah. Every main language today has, numerous. English, I suppose, is the leading one, but numerous works of Torah, whether it's the written law word, whether it's the oral word, whether it's halacha, Jewish law, Jewish philosophy, mysticism, translated into all kinds of languages. And in fact, there's something very interesting. The Rebbe is the one who explains it, and he explains how Moshe was the champion of it. And remember, why did it have to come through him? Because anything we have in Torah comes from Moshe. Mm-hmm. As the Talmud states, even a novel idea that seems to come through a student that is a diligent student studying, and he comes up with oh wow, an insight or something, even that was transmitted to Moshe. It's just been laying there dormant until this student kind of unraveled it, opened up that wrapper. Likewise, had Moshe not translated the Torah, it would never have been possible to translate it, and it would be unholy to learn it in any other language. And it's interesting that the Rebbe is the one who points this out. And the Rebbe points out that likewise, and the Rebbe always gave credit to his predecessors, but likewise we see that his father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, pushed this idea of translating even mystical parts of the Torah, such as the Tanya, things that are oh wow, this is Kabbalah, this into other languages. We know that he even pushed very strongly. This is prior to World War II. If I'm not mistaken, it was in the 30s to translate the Tanya into German. Who knows what greater problems he averted by capturing their language into something holy. Think of it this way: not that something holy was captured into the mundane language, but the other way around. The Rebbe really pushed this to the limit and beyond. Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, one of the highlights of the printing of the Tanya, and by the Rebbe you can almost, as much as we didn't understand, but you could feel. When a child feels like the parents are just excited. They may not have no clue what it is. Mm-hmm. They don't understand what happened. They don't know enough in life to be able to. It's likewise, we're like little tiny children. Mm-hmm. But the happiness, the glee in the Rebbe when they delivered the first printed Tanyas that were translated into English, complete, the Tanya, the Sefer Tanya. And it was almost like a new phase in the dissemination of the Hasidic teachings. You can see that by the Rebbe, this was like a new breakthrough. This was like, when they went to outer space, it was a big deal. But the first time a human landed on the moon, that's wow. You know what I'm saying? That was took it to the next level. That's what it was. So this is a big thing. And this, really, to summarize everything we learned today, at least this idea, this should really strongly encourage us to continuously study and use every available opportunity and medium in order to study. And the truth is that we live in a time that there's absolutely no excuse. Yeah. It's dark in here. Okay? Mm-hmm. Listen to a class. And you don't need to have some ugly, clunky Walkman like we all remember. Yeah. One of those clunky things, right? Which you're dude, I don't want to ruin my hair, and I can't put it over my hat. You don't know it's going to hang down here, it's going to fall. Come on, there's little earbuds. You can see it, and your thing lights up better than a book. Chabad.org, any other thing. Mm-hmm. So much, there's enough material that if one makes a deal with God, I want to see every single class that's available online on Torah. Be ready to live 200-300 years. You'll outlive your... Okay? That's how much stuff is available. Yeah. Okay? There's no excuse. One needs to utilize a little time, even, and I say this to people, and some people have already thanked me, as background noise. And you go, background, I have to sit down and listen. No. You do what you got to do. Let it play. Mm-hmm. Something seeps in. Something goes into the mind. Whether it's in English, whether it's in Spanish, whether it's in Portuguese, whatever is your language of choice, as long as it's not French. No, even French. Okay? And, so with that, we'll sign off. This shall hopefully will give us an extra push into having greater diligence into studying Torah. Shalom. Amen.